What's up, guys? Today we're going to be poking holes in all the GOATs' resumes. And disclaimer, I'm not trying to discredit all the GOATs, quote unquote, of the sport. I'm just showing that any fighter's records can be criticized because a lot of people after Ilia Topuria's win are coping. They're saying, man, Topuria only beat guys outside their prime. Max was cutting the featherweight. This guy was doing this. This guy, Volk, was coming off of 4 months of a knockout. So my point of this video is to show that any fighter ever in the history of the UFC, you can criticize their record and you can poke holes and say, but this, but that, just to show that if you're going to do it with Topuria, you can do it with all the other guys. So yeah, disclaimer, like I said, let's get right into it. Starting off with Jon Jones. Now, let's talk about Jon Jones. People want to poke holes in Topuria and everybody else's resume. So Jon Jones, right? Obviously, he's popped for steroids multiple times, so that automatically should disqualify him from the GOAT list. He's ducked top fighters. He refused to fight Tom Aspinall in his prime. He ducked Francis Ngannou and went out of business at the UFC for 3 different years. Let's look at his UFC wins. We'll poke holes in almost every single one of those, right? He has a win over 42-year-old Stipe Miocic, who, by the way, was coming off a 3-year layoff, coming off a knockout loss, and hadn't had a win in over 4 years, right? He beat Cyril Gane, fair enough, good win, but Gane is a tailor-made matchup for Jones to go up to heavyweight and win, a guy with no power and lackluster grappling. He lost to Dominic Reyes on the cards, got gifted a decision, and then ducked the rematch. He nearly lost to Thiago Santos, who had one leg in the fight, and also it was a split decision win. He took Anthony Smith to a decision, although dominant. Not finishing Anthony Smith isn't the greatest look, being that Anthony Smith has like a UFC record of 12-11 and got finished by nearly everybody in his prime, arguably, outside of Jon Jones. His first win against Alexander Gustafsson, you can say he arguably lost. The second win over Daniel Cormier, he popped for roids. His fight against Ovince St. Preux, he looked very mid and just not like himself. Glover Teixeira, great win. Fought Chael Sonnen, who was on a 1-fight losing streak and was never supposed to get a title shot in the first place. Vitor Belfort almost submitted him. Fair enough, he came back to submit Vitor Belfort. Lyoto Machida, good win. Rampage Jackson, good, solid win. Shogun, solid win. And Ryan Bader, good win. So you see, my point is you can poke holes in Jon Jones's resume from top to bottom. None of his wins are like stellar, like, wow, this is like undeniable. Outside of maybe the first Daniel Cormier win, the Glover Teixeira win, and maybe the Alexander Gustafsson 2 win, and a lot of his earlier wins. But as you can see, you can poke a lot of holes in Jon Jones's resume. Let's get on to GSP. Let's talk about GSP. So another GOAT of the sport, but GSP actually ducked top competition, right? After winning the middleweight belt and saying that he would go on to defend that middleweight belt, it was even in his contract. GSP ducked Yoel Romero and ducked Robert Whittaker. He retired from the sport and said, you know what? I don't want to fight these hungry guys, even though I said I would. I have stomach colitis, so we're going to give the belt up. And Robert Whittaker was promoted to the undisputed champ. People say he also ducked Anderson Silva, turned down that fight. He ducked the Johnny Hendricks rematch and retired. So obviously the fans and the UFC thought that GSP owed Johnny Hendricks a rematch because Johnny Hendricks on paper, a lot of people thought he won the fight, you know? He outstruck GSP, outgrappled GSP. GSP had more visible damage to his face. Everybody thought Johnny Hendricks won the fight, including Dana White, who's the promoter, and obviously would favor GSP to win because he makes him a ton of money. But even Dana White was saying that he owes it to the company to come back and give Johnny Hendricks a rematch. But he didn't. He retired from the sport for 4 years. And whenever he came back, he arguably beat the worst fighter to ever become double champ. GSP had the easiest route to middleweight double champ status. He had the easiest double champ status of any double champion in UFC history, in my opinion, because he went up to fight Michael Bisping. No disrespect to Michael Bisping, but in terms of skills, GSP is light years ahead of Michael Bisping. So that was an easy win for GSP to become double champion. And yeah, as I said with Jon Jones, look at GSP's resume. You can poke holes in it as well. Also, a lot of his earlier wins and title defenses were against mid-competition, like Jake Shields, Tylus Latis, Carlos Condit, Dan Hardy. It's like all those guys are decent, but none of them are amazing, you know? So let's get on to Jose Aldo. This is another guy that's in a lot of guys' top 5 in terms of GOAT status. So let's poke some holes in Jose's resume. Outside of Ilia Topuria, he's lost to every single featherweight champ. He lost to Max Holloway twice. He lost to Volkanovski. He lost to Conor McGregor. And he got finished by Max Holloway both times. He got finished by Conor McGregor in 13 seconds. And he got dominated by Volkanovski and to a 30-27 decision, I believe. He went 7-8 post McGregor fight. So after his loss to Conor McGregor, when he was 25-1 on a 10-year unbeaten streak, he went on to go 7-8 in his next 15 fights. So the latter half of his career, he did not have a winning record. And a lot of people don't talk about that. Jose Aldo does have the longevity. I mean, he was a WEC champion at like 22 years old and carried that on into the UFC. But 7-8 post McGregor fight when he was in his early 30s, not the best look. His title defense is not the greatest, let's be honest, not the best competition. Mark Hominick, Kenny Florian, who was 0-4 in title fights, Chad Mendez, both times, that's a good win, but the second Chad Mendez fight was very close. I think it might have been a split decision. Frankie Edgar, good win. Korean Zombie, it's like, it's okay. And Ricardo Lamas, it's okay. So his title defenses were a lot of journeymen, not the best of fighters. The only elite win in those title defenses, I would say, are Chad Mendez and Frankie Edgar. The rest are, maybe Korean Zombie, but that was a very young Korean Zombie. So, yeah, another fighter in Jose Aldo where you obviously can look at his resume and poke some holes in it. Let's get on to Demetrious Johnson, Mickey Mouse, like Ilia Topuria likes to call him. Mighty Mouse, a lot of people have him in their top 10, but the issue with Mighty Mouse and the holes in his legacy, or his resume, should I say, is that his level of competition is just not there, man. It's some of the weakest of any quote-unquote GOAT. Like, his level of competition is really what holds his resume back. If you want to talk about raw skills and just being a well-rounded fighter all around the board, DJ is one of the greatest to ever do it. But, man, the fighters he faced were just so mid. His title defense record is overrated because, listen, guys, he fought for a UFC title in like his second or third UFC fight, and the level of competition he faced was very mid. So it was a lot easier for a guy like Demetrious Johnson to get 11 title defenses than it would to be like for Drickus to get 11 title defenses in today's modern age, or Pantoja, because the fighters are just a lot better. So it's a lot harder to hold on to the belt. And in modern day UFC, you have to go on a long win streak to get a title shot. But I digress. If you look at DJ's title defenses, Ray Borg's very mid. Wilson Hayes, mid. Tim Elliott's 9-11 in the UFC, and Tim Elliott nearly submitted him in the first round. Henry Cejudo, good win. John Dodson ×2. John Dodson is solid, but he's not the best, He was kind of a journeyman. Chris Carriasso, Ali Bagatinov, Joseph Benavidez twice. That was a good win. And John Moraga. So as you can see, if you look at the title defenses of Demetrious Johnson, very, very mid. Like, the level of competition he faced, not very good. And then he went into what some people would call one championship, the B League. They still had good fighters in his weight class. He ended up getting KO'd by Adriano Martins. Fair enough, he came back in the rematch and flying knee KO'd him, which was extremely impressive. But he didn't fight the greatest of competition in one championship. So, like I said, guys, this video is just to show that you can go through any GOAT's resume and you can poke holes in it, just like people are doing to Ilia Topuria's resume right now. You can do this to anybody. So, yeah, these are the holes that I'm poking in Demetrious Johnson's resume. Let's look at the next fighter that we got. We got Islam Makhachev, because people are comparing him to Ilia, saying he's going to smoke Ilia. So let's look at Islam's resume. And there's 4 fights I want to talk about. Moicano on 1 day's notice, which didn't age well, by the way, because Moicano just lost to Dariush, and Moicano was ranked number 10 in the division. So Moicano on 1 day's notice, Volk on 11 days' notice, KO'd him, fair enough. Bobby Green and Dan Hooker, both on 1 week's notice. People forget, man, that Bobby Green and Dan Hooker both took the fight against Islam on short notice. So Islam has a lot of wins over guys on short notice, right? He struggled to take down one-hip Poirier, who's 35 years old. If you guys don't know, Poirier notoriously has hip issues. His hip... He's always talked about it, how it doesn't let him have the strongest base for takedown defense and that he wanted to get a hip replacement post-retirement. But the fact that he was able to stifle a lot of Islam's takedowns when Poirier in general across his career has not shown the most amazing takedown defense. I mean, he's been taken down even by Michael Chandler, was able to take him down and beat him up on the ground. So Islam struggling to take down a 35-year-old Poirier and didn't really work his grappling to the 5th round where he was able to get a submission. Wasn't the best look. And he didn't fight a lot of prime fighters in his lightweight division, right? He didn't fight prime Gamrot. He didn't fight prime Arman Sarukian. He didn't fight Ilia Topuria. Fair enough, who just moved up, Fair enough, he did fight prime Volk and prime Charles. But the point I'm trying to make is that Islam Makhachev's resume is great at lightweight, but his title run is a little bit Moicano on 1 day's notice, Volk on 11 days' notice. It's like Poirier, who's 35 and older, taking a lot of damage. But obviously, on the flip side, you have his wins over Alexander Volkanovski, who was the pound for pound number 1 at the time, and Charles, who was the pound for pound number 3 at the time on an 11-fight win streak. But it can go both ways. You can poke holes in Islam's resume. Nonetheless, I still think he's the greatest lightweight of all time, and he's a top 3 fighter of all time. I'm just, again, showing you that you can look at any fighter's resume and poke holes in it. That's all I'm doing, guys. I'm not discrediting these fighters. I'm just trying to make a point in this video. Getting on to their next fighter, Khabib Nurmagomedov. This is a good one, because a lot of people like to draw the narrative that, dude, Khabib's the GOAT, never bled, never lost, barely lost any rounds, 29-0. But let's look at Khabib's record, right? He fought all strikers. Let's be real. Outside of Rafael dos Anjos and Gleison Tibau, Khabib essentially fought all strikers in his career in the UFC. He didn't really have any. That's the biggest thing to go against Khabib, right? He never really fought anybody to challenge his style. And guess what? Newsflash, when he did fight a good wrestler in Gleison Tibau, Gleison was able to stuff nearly all of his takedowns and arguably won the fight. And obviously he dominated an arguably prime RDA, which was a great win. But another thing about Khabib, he doesn't have longevity, right? He retired from the sport at 32 years old in the middle of his prime. And his 3 title defenses were against all strikers. Dustin Poirier, right? Conor McGregor, right? Justin Gaethje, right? All strikers that have very mid ground games. Let's be real. And he never went for double champ status, which, you know, it is what it is. Not all fighters want to go for double champ status. Some fighters like Khabib want to stay in their own respective weight classes and dominate there. So I do respect a fighter's wishes if they just want to stay in their own weight class. But if you're going to have Khabib as your GOAT, you definitely have to look that he didn't really get challenged that much in his prime, right? He retired with only 3 title defenses, and he's a big what if. Not to mention, another thing about Khabib Nurmagomedov is that his pre-fight UFC career, he fought literal cab drivers in 2-round fights, which generally doesn't get scored on your MMA professional record. But Khabib was able to slide by and get a lot of fights in his earlier career before the UFC. You can't even name me a single opponent that Khabib beat before his UFC career. You can't name me a single one. You have to go on Tapology and look at them, and they all had losing records. And yeah, obviously, a lot of fighters before getting to the UFC, they don't fight the greatest levels of competition. My point is, there's a lot of things that you can look at Khabib and say, okay, this guy can't be the GOAT because he lacked longevity, he lacked title defenses, he lacked elite wins that weren't just all strikers. So yeah. And you can also say he fought who was in front of him, which would still be true. He did just fight who was there at the time. But you, like I said, if you want to poke holes in Ilia Topuria, you can also poke holes in Khabib and Islam's resume. Let's get on to the next one, Alexander Volkanovski, who's the consensus featherweight GOAT and in most people's top 5 fighters of all time. Now let's look at Volkanovski. He lost to both GOAT fighters he fought. So people call Volk the GOAT of the sport, but the issue with that is he lost to the 2 best fighters he faced, right? He lost to Islam and he got KO'd by Topuria. And you can argue that his resume is heavily carried by the Max Holloway wins. Now, a lot of people say this is cope. Dude, you can't just say without the Max wins, his resume would be mid, because that's literally his resume. Like, he beat Max 3 times. No one else has done that. But facts are facts, man. If you take out the Max Holloway wins, Volkanovski's arguably not even a top 15 fighter of all time. Max Holloway is everything when it comes to Volkanovski's resume. Everything. And he beat him 3 times, but that does heavily carry his resume, whether you want to admit that or not. His title defenses outside of Max Holloway weren't the best either. Korean Zombie, way past his prime. Yair Rodriguez, it's like, who has no takedown defense and was doing decent on the feet against Volk, right? Nah, I'm joking. He mauled Yair Rodriguez. And Brian Ortega, who had already taken a ton of damage and lost a few times and got busted up by Max Holloway and nearly submitted Volk 2 times. Guys, again, disclaimer, I'm not trying to discredit Volkanovski. I'm simply saying that you can look at any fighter's resume and you can poke holes and say, but this, but that. And showing across the board that there's no fighter in the history of the UFC that has a perfect resume. You can poke and prod at every fighter's resume. And yeah, Volkanovski's resume, 5 title defenses. He's now the first fighter in UFC history to win a title at the age of 35 or older in the lower weight classes. The first fighter, not the only fighter, because Pantoja just did it. But yeah, Volkanovski, one of the GOATs, obviously. But those are some holes you can poke in his resume. Next up, we got Anderson Silva. This is a great one. If you have Anderson Silva in your top 10 in 2025, you need to check yourself, because Anderson Silva, love him, hate him, whatever you want to say, this guy fought absolute taxi drivers in his UFC title defense run. He has the second most title defenses of all time, 10 title defenses. But man, the level of competition that Anderson Silva was facing versus guys like Islam Makhachev, guys like Volkanovski, even guys like Dricus. I think Dricus is close to passing up Anderson. If he gets like 2 more wins, he's a middleweight GOAT, just because Anderson's level of competition is horrendous. And he went 1-7-1 at the end of his UFC career, only winning one fight against Derek Brunson, which is an arguable robbery. So you could argue that he went 0-8 at the end of his UFC run. But let's look at his title defenses. Nate Marquardt, not the best. Rich Franklin, extremely overrated, never was really that great. I know he was champion, but in a very mid-era. Dan Henderson, good win, but Dan Henderson also had a ton of losses. James Irvin, there's not a single casual fan who knows who James Irvin is. Patrick Cote, mid. Tyler Slatis, mid. Forrest Griffin, mid. Damian Maia, decent. Chael Sonnen, mid. Yushin Okami, mid. Why did I have Chael Sonnen twice? But you get the point. Anderson Silva, during his title run, fought absolute taxi drivers, and he nearly lost and got dominated the entire fight against Chael Sonnen and locked up what some people would call a fluke triangle at the end of the fight. He was getting destroyed by Chael Sonnen, and who else does Chael Sonnen do that to in the grappling? But nonetheless, people like to gloat on Anderson Silva because as the middleweight GOAT because he has 10 title defenses. But again, he fought for the UFC belt in his second UFC fight. Dricus had to get 6, 7, 8 wins to fight for the belt. I think it was 7 wins. So you don't just get in the UFC in today's modern day and get the belt right away. And you have to fight your way up, which is why you see guys having less and less title defenses, because by the time they've fought great levels of competition and get to the belt, obviously you can only stay at the top for so long before the skills catch up to you, and you're not going to get as many title defenses. Whereas Anderson Silva got to fight for the belt in just his second fight. So yeah, that's the holes you can poke in Anderson Silva's resume. One of the easiest resumes to poke holes in. And last but not least, we got Kamaru Usman. And yeah, Kamaru Usman, a lot of people have him in their top 15, top 10. But yeah, this Malteser head, you can poke some holes in his resume as well. First of all, he's 1-3 in his last 4 fights. And now he's calling for a title shot after beating Joaquin Buckley. Listen, buddy, this is your first win in nearly 2 years. And you're 1-3 in your last 4 fights. And the 2 losses to Leon Edwards age very poorly. Leon Edwards has gotten nothing but dominated since he beat Kamaru Usman twice. He knocked him out, a little bit of a fluke, but then he came back to beat Usman by a dominant decision, you can argue. A clear 3-2, not dominant, but a clear 3-2 for Leon Edwards. He beat Kamaru Usman in the rematch, and then Leon Edwards got destroyed by Bilal, and then he went on to get completely and utterly embarrassed by Sean Brady and submitted. And you look at Kamaru Usman's title reign, it was against mid-competition and rematches, right? 2 wins against Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal's a bit of a journeyman. A win over Gilbert Burns, not the greatest in the world, but it's decent. And 2 wins over Colby Covington, which I think that Colby Covington is one of the most overrated welterweight fighters that we've ever seen. So it's like, if you're going to poke holes in everybody's resume where it comes to Ilia, whether it comes to Islam, Volkanovski, poke holes in everybody's resume. Because guess what? There's not a single fighter on the UFC roster in the history of the UFC that has an unbreakable resume. You can poke holes in every single one. You can say this guy is past his prime. You can say he lost to this guy. You can say he didn't have longevity. You can say he fought all strikers. You can say that he was knocked out by a mid fighter. There's so many things. So guys, the point of this vid, one last time, is not to discredit any fighter. It's more so to show that any fighter's resume can take criticism. No fighter has a bulletproof resume, and that if you're going to criticize one fighter, make sure you're criticizing your favorite fighter as well. And that's all I'm saying. So if you guys enjoyed this kind of video and you want to see more like this, do me a favor, drop a like on the video, leave me a comment, and let me know what you guys think and what other holes you can poke in these guys' resume. And yeah, who do you guys think should be the pound for pound #1 fighter right now? Ilia or Islam? It's a big discussion right now. A lot of people are saying Ilia is double champ and Islam Makhachev is not. So you got to give it to Ilia Topuria. A lot of people are also saying that Islam beat more fighters and good fighters in their prime. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Like I said, if you liked the video, then like the video. Always appreciate you guys watching. I'm out. Peace.